The boardroom was filled with tension, the kind that made the air heavy and every breath feel like betrayal. Ethan Clark stood at the end of the long mahogany table, his palms pressed flat against the polished surface. His heart pounded like a drum inside his chest as he looked around. Faces he had known for years now stared back at him with quiet suspicion. Daniel Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, sat at the head of the table. His tailored suit and calm expression masked the venom behind his blue eyes. "Ethan," Daniel began smoothly, "we have evidence that you've been embezzling funds from the company's overseas accounts. Care to explain yourself?" Ethan's throat tightened. "That's not true, sir." "I would never—" Daniel slid a folder across the table. "Then perhaps you can explain why your signature appears on these transfers." Ethan picked up the papers with shaking hands. His eyes darted over the documents, transfers he had never seen, amounts he had never approved. "This is a setup," he said, his voice breaking. "Someone's forged my signature." Daniel leaned back in his chair, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "That's a serious accusation, Ethan. Are you suggesting someone in this company fabricated evidence against you?" The board members whispered among themselves. Ethan looked around desperately, searching for a single ally, but there were none. He'd worked under Daniel for 10 years, building the company's logistics division from scratch, helping it expand across continents. He'd given everything, and now it was being ripped away. "Please, Daniel," Ethan said, stepping closer. "You know me. You know my work. I've been loyal since day one." Daniel stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Loyalty doesn't mean much when money's involved." "Security will escort you out." Ethan froze. "You're firing me? Without an investigation?" Daniel's eyes were cold. "The board has already voted." "You're done here." Two guards appeared at the doorway. Ethan's body went numb. As they grabbed his arms, he looked one last time at Daniel, and in that moment he saw it. A flicker of satisfaction in Daniel's eyes. That was when he realized this wasn't about stolen money. It was personal. Outside the building, rain began to fall. The sky, once bright, turned gray as Ethan stood there with his life's work gone in a single morning. The company ID in his hand felt like a mockery. When he got home, his wife, Lily, met him at the door. "Ethan, what happened? You look pale." He sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. "They accused me of theft. They fired me," Lily gasped. "What? That's impossible. You've been working day and night." "I know," he whispered. "But the documents had my signature. They set me up." She sat beside him, taking his trembling hands in hers. "We'll fight it. We'll hire a lawyer," he shook his head. "Against Daniel Whitmore? No one wins against him. He owns everything. The lawyers, the press, even the police chief owes him favors. Weeks turned into months. Ethan's name was dragged through the media. Former executive charged with corporate fraud." His friends stopped calling. His reputation, once spotless, was in ruins. Lily tried to stay strong, but their savings drained fast. The house, the car, the comfort, everything began slipping away. One evening, Ethan sat alone on the porch, staring into the distance as rain poured again. He could still hear Daniel's calm, poisonous voice in his head. "You're done here." That night, something inside him broke. Not with anger, but with purpose. He got up, wiped his face, and said softly, "No, Daniel. I'm not done." 2 years later, the world had changed. Ethan had changed. He had moved to another city, taken small consulting jobs, and built connections in silence. He studied the markets, learned investment strategy, and poured every bit of his pain into rebuilding himself. Sleep was rare, but determination burned brighter than rest. One morning, he received a message from an unknown number. "Heard what happened to you. I used to work under Daniel, too. I have information you'll want to see." Attached was a file, one that would change everything. Inside were emails, invoices, and offshore records. Proof that Daniel had been the one moving the money, using Ethan's credentials as cover. Ethan's pulse quickened. His hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from fire. He whispered to himself, "So you framed me to hide your crime." And for the first time in years, he smiled. Months later, Whitmore Enterprises began facing sudden problems, investors pulling out, Audits reopening old records, hidden accounts surfacing, and every time Daniel thought he'd contained the damage, a new leak would appear. He didn't know that the man he destroyed was now orchestrating every move from the shadows. Ethan had become something else. Strategic, patient, and ruthless when necessary. But deep inside, he wasn't just chasing revenge. He wanted Daniel to feel what he had felt. The slow, crushing realization of losing everything he once controlled. One evening, Daniel sat in his office, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls. His assistant entered, nervous. "Sir, the investors from Orion Group are here to discuss the acquisition deal." Daniel adjusted his tie and nodded. "Good. Let's get this done." When he walked into the meeting room, his confidence returned, until he saw who was sitting at the head of the table. Ethan Clark. Daniel froze. "You!" Ethan smiled calmly, standing up. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. It's been a while." Daniel tried to steady his voice. "You're behind all this?" Ethan walked closer, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Behind what? Your company's downfall? Your investors losing trust? Your empire crumbling?" He paused, leaning slightly forward. "I'm just doing business. Like you taught me?" Daniel's face turned pale. "You can't do this!" Ethan's voice dropped low. "Oh, I already have." The meeting ended with silence. The tables had turned, and for the first time, Daniel felt powerless. As Ethan walked out of the building, the night wind brushed against his face. He looked up at the towering logo of Whitmore Enterprises and whispered, "Welcome to your own trap." Ethan stood outside the glass building that once symbolized everything he'd lost. The power, the ambition, the pride, the same building that had spat him out and branded him a thief. Now, that empire was crumbling under its own deceit, and he was the silent storm behind it. He leaned against his black sedan, eyes fixed on the revolving doors as people rushed out. Nervous employees, panicked faces, whispers of layoffs. Whitmore Enterprises was no longer the corporate titan it had been. Its foundation was cracking, and every fracture led back to Daniel Whitmore. But Ethan wasn't smiling. Not yet. Revenge wasn't about moments, it was about destruction, slow, methodical, and unforgettable. He opened his phone, scrolling through encrypted messages. A name flashed on the screen. Maya. Maya. It's done. The auditors received the documents this morning. By next week, the authorities will start questioning Daniel's offshore accounts. Ethan. Good. Make sure nothing traces back to us. Maya. You're becoming colder every day, Ethan. Are you sure? This is what you want? Ethan. What I want stopped mattering 2 years ago. He locked his phone and took a deep breath. The night air was cool, but his heart still burned. Inside the penthouse office, Daniel slammed his fist on the desk. How the hell did they find out about the Cayman accounts? His assistant flinched. Sir, the auditors said they received an anonymous report. There's no trace of the sender. Daniel's eyes darkened. Find whoever sent it. I don't care how. As the assistant left, Daniel sank into his chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. He was used to control. Control of people, money, and information. But lately, everything was slipping through his fingers. He stared at his reflection in the office glass. For the first time, he looked old. Not in years, but in guilt. Then his phone buzzed. A message. No name, just a number. Check your email. The truth always finds its way home. Daniel's stomach twisted. He opened his inbox and clicked the new file. Inside was a list of every transfer he had made under Ethan's name, the same data he thought he had buried forever. How is this possible? He whispered. His hands trembled as he read line after line of proof. Someone had dug through encrypted layers and found everything. Someone who knew how he operated. Someone who wanted him exposed. He looked up suddenly, realization dawning like a curse. Ethan! Meanwhile, across the city, Ethan sat in a dimly lit apartment surrounded by maps, charts, and legal documents. His eyes were tired, but his mind was razor sharp. He replayed Daniel's downfall step by step, anticipating every reaction. He had learned that revenge wasn't about speed, it was about precision. Daniel's arrogance was his weapon, and Ethan had sharpened it perfectly. A knock echoed through the room. "Maya, come in," he said without turning. A tall woman with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor walked in. She carried a tablet and a faint air of unease. "You should get some rest," she said softly. "You've been at this for days." Ethan smiled faintly. "Rest is for those who have peace." She placed the tablet on the table. The press picked up the audit story. Whitmore Enterprises shares dropped another 7% today. Ethan nodded, but his expression didn't change. "Good, but not enough." Maya frowned. "How far are you planning to take this? You've already destroyed his reputation, his business is bleeding, and soon he'll face criminal charges. Isn't that enough?" Ethan leaned back, his eyes distant. "He didn't just ruin my career. He made me watch as everything I built turned into dust. My wife cried every night. My son asked why people called his father a thief, and I had no answers. You think one ruined company balances that?" Maya hesitated. "You've changed, Ethan. You're not the same man I met 2 years ago." He looked at her, a hint of pain flickering in his eyes. "No, Maya. I'm exactly who he made me." Across town. Daniel sat alone in his dark apartment, his phone lighting up with notifications, news reports, investor calls, legal warnings. The headlines were brutal. Whitmore Enterprises under federal investigation. Daniel Whitmore accused of fraud and financial misconduct. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands shaking. He'd spent decades building his empire, manipulating rivals, using people like chess pieces, and now he was the one cornered. The doorbell rang. He tensed. It was almost midnight. Cautiously, he walked to the door and opened it. No one was there, only an envelope taped to the door. He tore it open. Inside was a single photo, him at the very first board meeting years ago, shaking hands with Ethan Clark. On the back, one line was written in black ink. "You taught me how to win. Now I'm teaching you how it feels to lose." Daniel's face went pale. He sank to his knees, clutching the photo. "Ethan?" he whispered. A week later, Ethan attended a charity gala hosted by one of his new partners. Dressed in a black suit, he blended easily among the city's elite. People who once turned their backs on him, now shaking his hand like they'd always been allies. Maya watched from a distance. She had seen powerful men fall, but Ethan's transformation was something else entirely. The gentle strategist she once knew had turned into a man who moved with calculated vengeance. "Everyone here owes something to Whitmore's collapse," one businessman whispered to another. "Whoever orchestrated that deserves a medal." Ethan overheard and smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed no joy. The revenge that once gave him purpose now felt strangely hollow. He stepped outside for air, looking out at the skyline glittering beneath the stars. He'd won. Daniel was being investigated, stripped of power and publicly shamed. Yet the satisfaction he had imagined wasn't there. Maya joined him quietly. "It's over," she said. "You got what you wanted." Ethan exhaled slowly. "It's not over. Not until he feels the emptiness he left in me." Maya looked at him with quiet sadness. "Revenge doesn't fill emptiness, Ethan. It just changes its shape." He didn't answer. The night wind carried the distant sound of thunder, as if the storm wasn't done yet. Back in his office, Daniel looked out at the same skyline, except his view was from the ground now, stripped of power, influence, and pride. He clenched his fists and whispered, "You think you've won, Ethan? This isn't over. Because even a broken man can still strike back." And Daniel Whitmore wasn't done fighting. Rain lashed against the city that night, turning glass towers into mirrors of lightning and regret. Inside his dim apartment, Ethan watched the storm through the window. It suited his mood, turbulent, wild, unrelenting. He had taken everything from Daniel Whitmore, yet the taste of victory was bittersweet, almost hollow. A voice broke the silence. "You're still awake." Maya leaned against the doorway, her hair damp from the rain. She'd been out finalizing another deal, the one that would quietly absorb the last remnants of Whitmore Enterprises under their new name, Clark Holdings. Ethan turned from the window. Couldn't sleep. Because of him? Ethan gave a small nod. Because it feels too easy. Men like Daniel don't disappear quietly. Maya crossed her arms. He's finished. His assets are frozen, his partners have abandoned him, and the media's tearing him apart. You won. He looked at her, eyes dark, unreadable. Then why do I still feel like something's coming? He was right. On the other side of the city, Daniel sat in a half-empty office, his once gleaming empire now stripped bare. The desk was cluttered with papers, his tie loosened, his face aged by sleepless nights. But his mind, sharp as ever, was working again. He replayed everything. The audit, the leak, the downfall. It had all been too calculated, too perfect. Ethan had played him like a violin. But Daniel Whitmore wasn't a man who went down without a fight. He opened a hidden drawer and pulled out a flash drive, his insurance policy. Years ago, he had kept copies of documents that could destroy careers, manipulate markets, even blackmail politicians. Now he planned to use them all. "I built this city's business world," he muttered. "And if I fall, I'll take everyone with me, including you, Ethan Clark." The next morning, Ethan entered his company's glass-walled conference room. It still felt unreal. The same kind of room where Daniel once humiliated him was now under his control. The tables had turned completely. Maya followed behind, holding a file. "The takeover is complete," she said. "But there's something strange. One of Whitmore's old shell companies just moved a large sum offshore yesterday." Ethan frowned. "Impossible. His accounts are frozen. That's what we thought. But this transfer didn't come from him. It came from someone inside his old network." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "He's moving again," she nodded. "And that's not all. A journalist called this morning asking if you'd like to comment on a new investigation, apparently linking Clark Holdings to financial manipulation during Whitmore's collapse." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's trying to flip the narrative." Maya placed the file on the table. "He's not done, Ethan. He's fighting back." Ethan's silence was cold and heavy. He had expected resistance, but Daniel was more cunning than most. "Then we end this," he said finally. "Completely." That evening, Ethan drove through the storm to Daniel's old estate, now abandoned, covered in rain and shadows. It was once a palace of arrogance and ambition. Now it looked like a ghost. He entered quietly, the front door creaking open. Dust hung in the air. The portraits of Daniel and his family still lined the walls, frozen in time. In the living room, the fireplace flickered faintly. Someone had been here recently. "Ethan Clark," came a voice from behind. Ethan turned sharply. Daniel stood in the doorway, disheveled but defiant, holding a drink. "I was wondering when you'd show up," Daniel said. "You've taken everything from me. Congratulations." Ethan didn't move. "This wasn't about your company, Daniel. It was about truth." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Truth? You destroyed my life because you wanted revenge, not justice." Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "You framed me. You made me a criminal in front of my wife, my son, my colleagues. You ruined everything I had." Daniel took a step closer, his smirk returning. "And now you've done the same. Congratulations. You've become me." The words hit harder than Ethan expected. Daniel sipped his drink. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. You started a war, and I still have weapons." Ethan clenched his fists. "You can't hurt me anymore." Daniel's grin widened. "No, Ethan, but I can hurt the people around you." For the first time in years, Ethan felt a chill that wasn't from anger. It was fear. The next day, news broke across the city. Clark Holdings accused of corporate sabotage. Anonymous sources claim Ethan Clark orchestrated Whitmore's downfall illegally. Maya burst into his office, slamming her phone on the table. It's everywhere. He's leaking fake reports, using your old case against you. The same tactic he used years ago. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's turning my own strategy against me. She handed him another file. And it gets worse. Someone hacked our servers last night. Our merger data is gone. Ethan took a deep breath. He'd built this empire from ashes, but Daniel was determined to drag him back into the fire. Maya looked at him, desperate. What do we do? Ethan's eyes turned cold again. We fight smarter. If Daniel wants a war, I'll give him one. But this time, on my terms. That night, Ethan visited someone he hadn't seen in years. Liam, an old friend from his early career, now a cybersecurity expert. I need access to everything Daniel's done in the last 6 months, Ethan said. Emails, transfers, private communications. I want him exposed, Liam hesitated. You know this crosses a line, right? You're talking about digital espionage. Ethan looked him straight in the eyes. He crossed that line first, Liam sighed. You've changed, Ethan. You used to believe in justice. Now it sounds like all you care about is revenge. Ethan's voice dropped. Justice died the day he destroyed my life. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in a hotel suite, watching the chaos unfold on TV. Every news anchor was talking about Ethan Clark's questionable rise. The narrative was shifting perfectly. He smiled. Let's see how you like being the villain again. Then his phone buzzed. An unknown message. You're not as invisible as you think. Daniel frowned and opened the link attached. His screen filled with live footage, his hotel camera feed, showing him sitting exactly as he was now. He froze. Then another message appeared. You started this. I'll finish it. His breath caught. For the first time since losing everything, Daniel Whitmore felt fear. Back in his car, Ethan closed his laptop. His reflection glowed faintly in the rain-streaked window, a man half lit by vengeance, half consumed by guilt. Maya's voice came through the speakerphone. What did you do? Just reminded him he's not untouchable. Ethan replied quietly. Ethan, she said softly. You're becoming what you hate. He didn't answer. Outside, thunder roared again, echoing the war between two men who had built their lives on betrayal, and were now drowning in it. The night city glimmered under a storm of flashing lights and sirens. On every screen, Ethan Clark's name blazed like a curse. Corporate criminal, business manipulator, the man who broke Whitmore Industries. Inside his office, Ethan stood in silence. His empire, built from ashes, was collapsing in slow motion. Reporters crowded the entrance, investors withdrew, and government regulators called for an emergency investigation. Maya walked in, face pale. They've suspended trading on our stock, she said quietly. The board wants your resignation. Ethan looked out the glass window. The skyline that once symbolized power now looked like a cage. Let them have it, he said flatly. For now. Maya stepped closer. For now? Ethan, this isn't a game. Daniel's destroyed your public image. You're being painted as the same monster he once was. He turned to her, calm but sharp. That's what he wants, for me to break. But I've learned something about men like Daniel Whitmore. They always overplay their hand. Across town, Daniel was celebrating in quiet triumph. The hotel suite was dim, his glass half full of whiskey. News anchors discussed Ethan's downfall like it was entertainment. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. You built yourself up with my name, he whispered at the screen. Now you'll fall with it too. But before he could sip his drink, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number, enjoying your victory, Daniel? He frowned, typing back. Who is this? Seconds later, an email popped up. Encrypted, anonymous. He opened it, and his smile vanished. Inside were images, screenshots of his hidden accounts, recordings of his old deals, and video clips showing him bribing officials. Evidence that could destroy him completely. Then a message appeared below. You wanted a war. Here's the battlefield. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he realized Ethan had struck back. Meanwhile, In a dim warehouse filled with computer monitors, Ethan and Liam watched Daniel's reaction in real time. "He took the bait," Liam said. "The data we planted in his system has been copied to every major outlet's leak tracker. The moment he tries to delete it, it'll auto-send to the press." Ethan's gaze didn't move from the screen. "Good. Let him feel the pressure he once gave me." Liam turned to him. "Ethan, what if this goes too far? He's already ruined. You could end up breaking laws here." Ethan's voice was low. "He taught me the rules of this game, and how to break them." Liam hesitated. He'd known Ethan for years, but this version of him, cold, calculated, driven entirely by vengeance, was almost unrecognizable. 2 days later, chaos hit Daniel like a storm. His old partners cut ties, his hidden accounts were frozen, and authorities reopened past investigations. Every call he made ended with a hang-up. The hunter had become the hunted. In panic, Daniel reached out to Maya, the one person he believed might still understand his enemy. She picked up, her tone guarded. "Why are you calling me?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "Listen, I know Ethan's using you. He's not the man you think he is." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "You destroyed his life, Daniel. You don't get to play victim now." "I made mistakes," Daniel said, desperate. "But if he keeps going like this, he'll destroy himself too. He's obsessed." "Enough," she interrupted. "You built a world of lies and now it's burning. Don't expect sympathy." She hung up before he could reply, but his words lingered in her mind. He'll destroy himself too. That night, Maya went to Ethan's apartment. He was sitting at his desk, eyes fixed on the flickering screens showing news reports, data charts, and live surveillance of Daniel's movements. "Ethan," she said softly, "you have to stop this." He didn't look up. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're planning. It's going too far. He's finished. You won." Ethan's fingers tightened around his pen. "Winning isn't enough. He needs to understand what it feels like to lose everything." Maya's voice cracked. "You already proved your point. Don't become him, Ethan." He finally looked up, his eyes dark and tired. "I already am." The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt her heart sink. "You told me you wanted justice," she said, tears forming. "But this is just revenge, and it's killing you." Ethan stood slowly, stepping closer. "You think justice exists in a world Daniel Whitmore built? He framed me, took my life from me. I'm just returning the favor." Maya shook her head. "Then what happens when it's over? When there's no one left to destroy?" He didn't answer, because deep down, he didn't know. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in darkness, the walls of his hotel room closing in. Every sound outside made him flinch. He was running out of options. He opened his last secure account and saw a single message from an unknown sender. "Meet me. Tonight. Pier 19, midnight. No name. No number. Just a location." He hesitated, then grabbed his coat. At midnight, the pier was silent except for the sound of waves hitting metal. Daniel stood there, shivering in the cold when headlights cut through the fog. A black car stopped a few feet away. Ethan stepped out. Daniel's eyes widened. "You." Ethan walked closer, calm, almost emotionless. "I warned you not to push me." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you a hero? You're no different from me now." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but at least I know it." Daniel stepped forward, rain dripping from his coat. "You think revenge will fix what I did to you? It won't. You'll wake up tomorrow and realize you've built your empire on the same lies I did." Ethan said nothing. Daniel took another step. "You could have been better than me, Ethan, but you chose to become me." The silence between them was deafening. Only the waves spoke, crashing like distant applause for two broken men. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "Maybe you're right. But unlike you, I'll live with it." He turned to leave. Daniel shouted, "You'll regret this!" Ethan stopped. "I already do." Then he walked back to his car and disappeared into the fog. By morning, the city woke to headlines that shook the entire corporate world. Daniel Whitmore arrested on charges of corruption and bribery. Anonymous leaks revealed decade of manipulation in Whitmore Empire. Ethan watched from his office window as the news rolled in. Reporters camped outside Daniel's arrest scene. It was over. Maya entered quietly. It's done. He's finished for good. Ethan nodded, but his face didn't show victory, only exhaustion. You got what you wanted, she said gently. So why do you look like you lost? Ethan turned to her slowly. Because I did. Somewhere between justice and revenge. I lost myself. She took a step closer, placing a hand on his arm. Then find yourself again. Let this end. He looked out the window one last time, at the city that once destroyed him, and that he had now destroyed in return. Maybe someday, he said softly. Outside, the storm had stopped. But inside Ethan Clark, another storm was still raging, one that no victory could silence. The world had already judged Ethan Clark. Some called him a hero who brought down a corporate monster. Others whispered that he was no different from Daniel Whitmore, just a younger, smarter version wearing guilt instead of pride. But Ethan didn't care what they thought. Because in the silence of his penthouse, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and fading city lights, he finally realized that victory had no sound. It was just quiet, too quiet. Maya entered without knocking. She had stopped asking for permission weeks ago. Have you eaten? She asked softly. Ethan didn't look up. Food doesn't fix what's broken, Maya, she sighed, walking closer. Then tell me what does. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. I destroyed him. Everything he had, gone, and yet, I don't feel anything. No satisfaction, no peace. Just emptiness. Maya's eyes softened. That's because you didn't want revenge. You wanted closure. But you can't get that by hurting someone, even if they deserved it. He gave a bitter smile. You talk like forgiveness is easy. It's not, she said gently. But it's the only thing that stops you from becoming what you hate. Ethan looked out the window. The city lights shimmered like distant ghosts of his past life. I spent years trying to rebuild myself after Daniel ruined me. I thought if I made him suffer, I'd finally be free. But maybe I just rebuilt another prison, with his name carved on every wall. Maya reached out and took his hand. Then walk out of it. Let it go. For a long moment he said nothing. Then almost in a whisper, How? Start by facing what you've avoided, she said. Go see him. Ethan froze. Daniel? She nodded. He's in custody, waiting for trial. If you want peace, talk to him before it's too late. 3 days later, Ethan found himself standing outside a gray government building under a heavy sky. Reporters still haunted the gates, whispering as he walked by. He ignored them all. Inside, a guard led him down a narrow corridor until they stopped in front of a small room divided by glass. Daniel Whitmore sat inside, wearing a plain jumpsuit, his once perfect hair graying around the edges. When he looked up and saw Ethan, his lips curled into a faint, tired smile. So, Daniel said, his voice low and rough, the prodigal son returns. Ethan sat down across from him. I'm not your son, Daniel, Daniel chuckled. No, you're better. You actually finished what I started. Ethan's jaw tightened. I didn't come here to gloat. Then why are you here? Daniel asked. You won. The Empire's gone. I'm done. Ethan took a deep breath. I came to understand why. Why you did it. Why you destroyed me back then. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Because I was afraid. That answer stunned Ethan. Afraid? Of what? Of becoming irrelevant, Daniel said softly. You were young, brilliant, fearless. I saw myself in you, but better. And it terrified me. So I crushed you before you could replace me. He looked down at his trembling hands. But in doing that, I created the very thing I feared. Ethan stared at him for a long moment, every emotion colliding inside. Anger, sadness, disbelief. You ruined my life. Ethan said quietly. You took everything from me. Daniel nodded. And now I've lost everything. Maybe that's balance. Ethan leaned closer to the glass. No, Daniel. That's karma. They sat in silence, separated by a thin pane of glass and years of betrayal. Finally, Daniel spoke again, voice barely audible. You'll learn something, Ethan. Power always costs more than it gives. You think you own it, but it ends up owning you. Ethan looked into Daniel's eyes, the man who had once been his mentor, his enemy, his mirror. For the first time, he didn't feel hate, just pity. You're right, Ethan said softly. I became you, for a while, but I won't die that way. Daniel's tired eyes flickered with something, regret, maybe pride. Then maybe you're stronger than I ever was. Ethan stood up. Goodbye, Daniel. As he turned to leave, Daniel called out, voice cracking. Ethan, don't waste your second chance. Ethan paused, then walked out without looking back. The morning sun touched the glass walls of the foundation building like a quiet blessing. Ethan Clark stood by the large window of his new office, watching the light spill across the city skyline. It was the same city that once destroyed him, and yet today, it looked almost alive. The plaque on the front desk downstairs read, The Second Chance Foundation, founded by Ethan Clark. Every day, men and women walked through those glass doors, victims of corporate greed, whistleblowers silenced by power, dreamers broken by the system, and walked out with hope. Ethan had built empires before, but this time he was building hearts. Maya entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. She'd become his closest confidant, not just a colleague. Big day, she said, smiling. The foundation's first public anniversary. Ethan took a deep breath and smiled faintly. Feels different from every launch I've ever done. That's because it's not about profit anymore, Maya said, handing him the cup. It's about people, he nodded. People like us, the ones who got lost in the noise. She leaned on the window beside him. Do you ever miss it? The boardrooms, the deals, the power? Ethan laughed softly. Power was just noise. I used to think it meant control, but it only made me lose control of myself. Maya smiled. Then you've learned what most never do. That afternoon, the event hall filled with reporters, guests, and beneficiaries of the foundation. Photos of smiling families and rebuilding lives covered the walls. Ethan stepped onto the stage, calm, centered, almost unrecognizable from the man who once burned with vengeance. He began to speak, his voice steady and clear. A few years ago, I was a man consumed by anger. I believed revenge would bring justice, but all it brought was silence, the kind that echoes when your soul has nothing left to say. The room grew still, every eye fixed on him. Then I realized forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of hate. That's why I built this foundation. Because everyone deserves a second chance, including me. The crowd erupted in gentle applause, but Ethan barely heard it. He wasn't performing anymore. He was healing aloud. After the ceremony, people came to thank him. Single mothers, ex-employees, small business owners, all helped by the grants and support his foundation offered. But one figure stood at the edge of the crowd. An older woman with a kind, weary smile. When their eyes met, Ethan froze. It was Daniel's wife, Margaret Whitmore. She approached him slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. You don't need to be afraid, Ethan. I'm not here to accuse you. He swallowed hard. Mrs. Whitmore, I didn't expect... She raised a hand gently. I know what Daniel did to you. I know the pain he caused. But I also saw the man he became before the end. Ethan blinked. Before the end? Her eyes softened. He passed away last month. Heart failure. Peacefully in his sleep. Ethan went silent. Margaret continued, her voice trembling. He talked about you, you know. Said you were the only person who ever stood up to him. And the only one who made him see who he really was. Ethan felt something heavy break inside. Not sadness. Not relief, but an ache deeper than both. I thought I'd feel better knowing he was gone, he whispered. But I just feel empty again. Margaret reached out and placed her hand over his. That emptiness isn't loss, Ethan. It's space. Space you made when you let go of hate. Fill it with something good. She smiled softly. Daniel couldn't do that. But you can. Ethan nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that. Before leaving, she handed him an envelope. He wanted you to have this. When she was gone, Ethan opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A young Ethan and Daniel standing together in front of the old Whitmore building. back when Ethan was just an intern. On the back, Daniel had written in shaky handwriting, "Forgive yourself before the world does." Ethan's eyes blurred. "For the first time in years," he whispered, "I forgive you, Daniel." That night, Ethan drove alone to the old part of the city, where his downfall had begun. He stopped outside the abandoned Whitmore building, now covered in dust and ivy. The giant logo had faded, but a faint outline remained. He stood there quietly for a long time, then smiled faintly. "This is where I lost everything," he said softly, "and where I found myself again." He took out a small notepad from his coat and wrote one final line under Daniel's old message. "And now, I choose peace." He slipped it through the broken door and turned away, walking into the night. Months passed. The foundation expanded internationally. Ethan refused awards and interviews, letting the work speak for itself. His focus was simple: rebuild lives quietly, no cameras, no ego. But one day, Maya entered his office with a spark in her eyes. "Ethan, there's something you need to see." She turned on the projector. A news report played on the screen. A group of children stood outside a new community center built with funds from his foundation. Reporter asked one little boy, "Do you know who helped build this place?" The child grinned. "A man named Ethan. Mama says he fixes broken things." Ethan smiled faintly, emotion thick in his throat. "Fixes broken things, huh?" Maya grinned. "I'd say that's a pretty good legacy." He looked at her, eyes full of peace. "Maybe that's what I was meant to do all along." A year later, Ethan visited the lake house where his story had shifted from revenge to rebirth. The water was still, reflecting the golden sky. He placed a white rose by the edge and whispered, "This is for everyone I lost, and everyone I hurt along the way." He stayed there until the sun dipped low, then turned back toward his car. Maya was waiting by the door, smiling softly. "You ready?" He nodded. "Yeah, for the first time, I really am." She looked at him curiously. "Ready for what?" He smiled. "For life." They drove away as the light faded, leaving behind the lake, the ghosts, the regrets, and carrying only the lessons. Years later, people still talked about Ethan Clark, not as the man who destroyed Daniel Whitmore, not as the CEO who rose from ruin, but as the man who built something greater than both: hope. And sometimes, when someone broken came through the doors of his foundation, Ethan would greet them with a calm smile and say, "You don't need revenge. You just need a second chance."